Welcome to another episode of Business Beyond Borders. Today, we're very excited to have with us Professor Dr. Eckart Brödermann, who is also the founding partner of Brödermann Jahn, and he currently also lectures at the University of Hamburg. Welcome, Professor. Welcome to our episode.
Hello. Hello, Daphne. I'm honored to speak with you, speaking to you from Hamburg, Germany, looking at the roofs covered by snow here on St. Nicholas Day in Hamburg.
How timely we are speaking on St. Nicholas Day, right?
Absolutely. Next Nicholas Day is a day where you want to make gifts. And I understand that the purpose of this podcast is to make gifts to the young generation.
Exactly.
I'm myself a father of 4 children between age 23 and 30. And I just imagine that I speak to them and their friends. And in that way, if I can do anything to engage in business beyond borders, that's exactly the best way to do.
Thank you so much. And maybe for the audience, would love to have a quick introduction of you first, to learn about what are you up to, what are you doing right now?
You know, when I was age 18, I thought I had to get out of Germany and look at the world. And I spent 8 years abroad in France, in America, studied at Harvard University, took the New York bar, lived as a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and then financed my third studies in Germany, found my wife, she earned the money, I was able to do research, and at some point he said, darling, we wanted to have 4 children, we better get started. So I had to start working as a lawyer, and it's a great way to spend your life. But I always started working only on cross-border issues. So that was kind of my niche. It's a huge area. And exactly, especially in these days, if I even mention Ukraine, which has become one of my professions, I created last year jointly with my wife and my law firm Brödermann Jahn charity. We already have brought more than 1.7 or 8 million of humanitarian help to Ukraine. And I think we are currently really fighting for the values of democracy, of humanity, and of social behavior. So that's one of my jobs. Another one is teaching professor at the university. Since 1996, I'm teaching, and I've lifetime tenure there. And I also have become senior vice president of an international group of law firms called Primaris in 50 jurisdictions around the globe. Wow. So I'm in weekly discussion over coffee. Sometimes we just meet by video chat over a cup of coffee and discuss basically every week. So I hear voices from Africa, from South America, Asia, all over the world. And there is a lot to do, and I'm happy to answer any questions which you may have.
Nice. Maybe before we look into the future, would love to kind of rewind time a little and go back to, your journey in, you mentioned that you have only done anything cross-border. Would love to understand a little bit more about your journey in international law, and also what made you really decide or to specialize in cross-border type work, as you have mentioned.
At age 18, I went for France and I studied law in France. And then basically I looked into history. And, there are generations of people who had to migrate, especially from Germany, with the atrocities the Nazi regime has done in the 1940s. There were generations of people who had to leave Germany,
right,
and who had to flee. And then they lived as exiles somewhere else. So just to be in exile without being really connected to your own country is not nice either.
Yep.
We can make it nice, but let's always think positive. But it's nicer to do the cross-border stuff, to work on the interfaces. Yep. So in the end, I ended up spending time in France, but also in America and Germany. So I got engaged in the 3 kinds of families, because we distinguish in the law families of law. Right. And there are a lot of legal families incubated by French origin, by Anglo-Saxon common law origin, or even by German law origin. And over time, in the last 50 years, there's even something better, because in 1926, the world founded the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law as an offspin of the League of Nations.
Mm-hmm.
And that is called UNIDROIT, yeah? One law in a way, UNIDROIT. And that international organization, UNIDROIT, they developed over 50 years a series of principles how to contract without just looking at local laws. You know, any local law, whether from Singapore or Germany, they're made for local people. They're made by local legislators with usually no broad international experience. So things like different time zones, set of different currencies, all kind of background issues you usually don't think about, they're all covered there. And this is why I have come since 20 years to contract internationally under international principles of general principles of law rather than any national.
Very nice, very nice. And building on that, given that you have experiences across so many different jurisdictions, how, or in your view, how has the landscape of international law evolved over the past 3 decades?
I have been actively in there for 4 decades, and with their ups and downs, we fought when we were in Paris. We were young. We were fighting for democracy, fighting for values, and for grouping together within Europe.
Yep.
And I would have never imagined that a lot of that is now happening because we merged closer together to avoid being taken over, or to avoid getting involved in a global fight. That's how it happens. But other things have happened voluntarily. I think I'm of the generation who really thought that with trade we get to peace. And I deeply believe that once you speak with people, everybody in the end, they want to live in peace, and they love peace, and they love trade. And if you trade and you engage in trade, then in a way there is no time to shoot. So it's very sad that we see some other examples these days, and the atrocities currently happening, for example, in Ukraine, are really frightening, because Ukraine is so important also for grain, for lithium, for all kind of rare minerals. And so not in addition to all the humanitarian aspects, and all the aspects of justice for which I fight as a lawyer, we also have the economical side, which makes it important to safeguard it, and in the first place respect the sovereignty of the nations. And I'm of the generation which likes to respect that sovereignty, and nonetheless with each nation and with each individual to trade. There's no problem. I also have spent very nice time in Moscow, and I'm looking forward. I hope that in my life I still can travel again there and do trade with them. It's only a small part of politicians getting involved for all kind of reasons which are beyond my usual thinking. Most of us, we just want peace and trade, and that is what I concentrate on, how to do it. Because I think in the end, if we operate under neutral rules, like the UNIDROIT Principles of International Commercial Contracts, first released 40 years ago in 1993 or 1994, and last released in 2016 in the 4th edition. If we work with these kind of instruments, I think in the end that contributes to peace. That I think is so important.
Yeah. And also I think building on that, previously we had a brief discussion, and you mentioned about in terms of the development across international law evolving over the past couple of years, there is a difference between how contract law has evolved versus arbitration. Would you like to share a little bit around your perspective on how those two have evolved in the international arena?
Absolutely. When I started in the early 80s, arbitration was still quite rare. It did exist. There's a history of arbitration back to Egyptian types, and of course, even the French Constitution of the Napoleon time has the constitutional right to arbitration, basically meaning everybody is entitled to decide how to solve any dispute. If you and I were to get in a fight, we could say this is a St. Nicholas little bear, and we could say, we throw the bear, and whoever sees the face wins. Yeah, we could decide to do that. That's our own, and whoever gets the face or the coin, you throw the coin, who gets the face wins. And instead of doing that, we could, on the other hand, go to court and fight in court and spend a lot of money on lawyers. And the middle is good. The middle is, let's not just face a coin. Let's exchange the argument, and then let's choose somebody whom we trust as an arbitrator.
Right.
We think is qualified, and have that person do the job. And in the last 40 years, a lot of international institutions emerged. By now, we have over 1,000 arbitral institutions around the globe. The kind of rules they have, they're approaching over time. Over 20 years ago, we had the then Vice President of UNCITRAL, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, Professor Bergsten, who left back for New York teaching. Had fallen in love with his wife, today's wife, a beautiful Austrian lady. And then he came up with the idea of, let's have a Wismut court competition around the globe. By now, there are over 380 teams from different universities participating. But the final we have in Vienna. So he had a reason to come back to Vienna and marry his wife.
So lovely. And I'm sure you have had many experiences on various contracts and deals and cases that you have worked with. And would you be able to share with us an example of a particularly complex international transaction that you have worked on? And if you reflect back on that, what were some of the key factors that led to its success?
In the end, those international contracts and transactions depend on people who want to realize their dreams or their business plans. In the beginning, there's always a business plan. So I remember years ago a transaction where two people doing business met in Canada. They shake hands and thought that's a deal. But they shake hands about, transferring a huge group of companies in many jurisdictions.
Wow.
So, of course, to do it, you then have to look in the different laws, and the company subjected to German law is transferred differently as compared to the rules for company incorporated under English law. So in the end, there is more. And then the lawyer, we facilitate them. We as lawyers, we can help make people realize the dream, and we can help them become millionaires. And that's a great job. And we're helping them to do that. And so in that transaction, we respected the Canadian deal. So we said some of the, let's say, contractual obligations are under Canadian law, but some of the company law aspects, which is a different kind of qualification in the law, they are then submitted to the different national laws. So we found the way. And of course, if I were to do the same deal today, 40 years later, I would look at the UNIDROIT Principles and work on that basis. And you have, at the moment, people get together. For example, if in an international network people liaise, it's best to do it under the UNIDROIT Principles. If you and me, we want to do a contract, if you do a contract from a Singapore perspective, you look at common law, English law influence. But remember, and we saw it during COVID, in English law, you do not have a general principle of good faith and fair dealing. And if you look deeply, you find very often very solid practical English rules, even without good faith and fair dealing, which in the end, if we judge it from a civil law perspective, look like good faith and fair dealing. But that is a lot of research, a lot of lawyer time, and can be very expensive. And on the other hand, you have all the civil law lawyers, and that's about, I would say, 2/3 of the world these days, with Brazil and China and of course continental Europe. They start from the principle of good faith and fair dealing. So what the UNIDROIT Principles did, trying to englobe everybody, they were able to walk through the life of a contract from the beginning, from the formation of contract to the end, to prescription of claims.
Right.
And they went through all the issues, 211 of them in those rules. And for each one, they created a rule which is sufficiently specific to meet the needs of an English or Singapore lawyer, in our example, but also meet the test of good faith and fair dealing. So both people are happy. This is why it's so ingenious, because everybody finds itself. I had a conference in 2018 where I invited 125 people from 25 nations to Hamburg. And we're going to do it again in next year. And I asked people to compare the UNIDROIT Principles with their own law. And regardless whether the people were from China, from New York, or from Germany, they all came to the conclusion it's not that different from my own law. Because, of course, because it's a compromise, and this is so ingenious.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
This is why it's a very, very nice way to do. It doesn't get the lawyers out of work. It just gives them the possibility to concentrate on the core issues, the relevant issues, like price, identity of the contract. What exactly shall we speak about? Shall be trade, and then maybe technical specifications, limitation of liability. So that's enough to do, but why to think about background issues like how to set up foreign currencies?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it helps in a unifying way to bring the law, in a sense, bring the law together through these principles.
Absolutely. You can contract, there's freedom of contract. The starting point is good faith, respect of mandatory law, and realization of freedom. I'm a big believer of freedom. And to the extent that you don't interfere to the right of third parties, that you don't interfere into mandatory law, just no money laundering, no corruption, all that stuff. Then of course are red lights to be respected. And that's the one side. That's the core side. But within that, there is freedom, and it's good to have. I mean, like if you buy a jacket or robe for a lady, or custom for us men, and if you do that, you don't need the tailor to reinvent everything. You can go in a shop and see there's something and then adapt it a little bit. That's faster than if you start from scratch.
Yes.
Usually, I mean, there's some people so fast, but generally, and that's a little bit the idea. So these UNIDROIT Principles, I told you I wrote an entire book on that.
And congrats on the launch of the book.
Thank you. It took me 1,500 hours or 3 years to write the first edition, and the same amount of time to write the second edition. In addition to help by my students who helped me doing research, etc., really went to all the materials and tried to look it up and tried to, put in their experience. And I'm hearing a lot from other colleagues who also use the UNIDROIT Principles, but I'm just starting to speak out to talk about it. If we want to bring life together, I think we have to share these experiences. I'm very grateful for the opportunity of this podcast, to tell people it works. Try it, and works. In the beginning, nobody is born a senior partner. We all start as young, and then we develop and take it step by step. And I was in Switzerland in my first big arbitration. I was trying to get English law. The other side wanted to get Swiss law, and in the end, it was the arbitrator who introduced the concept, why don't you consider to meet on a truly neutral law? So during the arbitration, we switched. We gave up our fight about the applicable law, and we agreed on the UNIDROIT Principles. And I've seen that later again in my life. And I've heard it also from other colleagues. Arbitration is confidential, so you don't find it in the reports. but there is a lot out there, and the dynamic young arbitrator can help facilitate in the end settlement, because once people agree also on the basis of the contract, they can settle more easily, and otherwise they can fight on the facts and not so much concentrate on the law here.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I'll be sure to link to your book in our show notes below so that more people can find out about the UNIDROIT principles and learn more about it.
And the UNIDROIT principles also exist in many languages. One of my sons is about to marry an Ukrainian woman. He proposed this summer. And so my future daughter-in-law just finished yesterday the process of translating the black letter rules to Ukrainian.
Nice.
But they are out there in a dozen languages. You find them also in Japanese, you find them in Arabic, you find them in French and English, etc. By the way, my book is about to be translated in several languages.
Very
the
nice.
Spanish version is about to be finished. The French team is working, and I'm currently talking about further translation projects in Arabic, Japanese, Vietnamese, Portuguese. And I think that makes it easier because everybody can read for yourself. You can read in your own language and then negotiate in English. Because the reality is, I don't know how well you speak English, because in Singapore, I think you grow up with English, but I don't speak English. You know, I try, but in the end, I'm not a native. So you can never be sure that what I say is exactly the
what
same
you mean.
you understand it.
Exactly.
And that's so fascinating with cross-border that it's all about cultural bridging. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing what you're doing here with the book and sharing more about these UNIDROIT principles, that you are bringing people together and helping them do their work better to what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd love the next generation really to jump on it and and don't be fearful. I mean, it's akin to, it takes you only a couple of hours to once read through it and get a feeling. I mean, 211 principles, 20-30 pages. That is something which is readable. And the rules are reasonable. Yeah, they're all reasonable. They're easy to digest and sufficiently concrete, as I said. So nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, building on this, since you have spent quite a bit of time writing alongside, you know, working together with your clients, but spend quite a bit of time writing, including books that you have just mentioned, articles around international commercial law. What is your personal goal that you would love to convey to the readers as well as practitioners and students?
It's twofold. Number one, when you contract, why don't you concentrate on the essential point and use as a background the neutral thing? It's fairer, it's more equal for everybody, it's an equal playing field. And even if you're the market power side or party which has the power, you often are still better off with these principles as compared to your own law. My own German law, for example, is very set on issues of general terms and conditions. But people have usually no time to individually write each contract anew. So there exists general terms and conditions. But the concept of our law coping with the GGC is just too complex for foreigners. Yeah, so it's easier even then to work with the UNIDROIT principles, although I know my own law. So it's not a matter of national pride, but it's a matter of overcoming the barriers and open up. And on the other hand, in arbitration in the end is all about dispute resolving. That's our goal. So I personally think an arbitration which settles during the arbitration, I have nothing against it. I think it's good. But I know there are colleagues who say, no, you're too active. We just sit there, let them fight. And if they are too stupid to discover all issues, let's not give them a hint. Yeah. And that's against our philosophy, where even in our code and civil procedure law, we have the obligation of the judge to give an indication of the party on relevant points of law. But of course, the moment you do that, you kind of interfere in the interrelation between the two. But if you do it in the purpose of settling things, we think it's good. And in other jurisdictions, it's thought not so good. So why not at the management conference, at the beginning of the arbitration, bring up the topic and discuss it with the people, bring them up to the possibility of settling on the UNIDROIT principles, for example, or whether to refer to the UNIDROIT principles, even if the national law applies. There are hundreds of decisions in over 25 countries, and I did that research, where even national courts have relied on the UNIDROIT principles to supplement or interpret their own law. So that's fascinating. Even if you do not like to work with general principles of law, which is not the cup of tea of everybody. Yeah, let's respect everybody. Everybody can be happy as they wish to be. But even if you want to work just with national law, then you still need to know about the UNIDROIT principles because they help you to supplement and to interpret it. For example, there is the Convention on the International Sale of Goods, the CISG, which is also part of this famous Wismut court competition, and which very often applies in practice because people, even if they wish to deviate from the CISG, they do it wrongly, and in the end, they're stuck with the CISG. So the CISG is an older compromise of the 1970s, but also a nice compromise, and it's treaty. It's treaty law and therefore binding. So unless you explicitly exclude them or you choose otherwise and say, I prefer to work with the UNIDROIT principles, that's everybody can make its choices, but I want people to make the choices. I'm not saying everybody must work with these UNIDROIT principles. No, I'm saying everybody must consider its options and then make a reasoned decision. And not be blind and not see the international stuff. And that is so much fun to discover. You're like a scout in the jungle to find out which rules apply here.
And interesting that you also mentioned in the introduction that you also spend quite a bit of time teaching. So how has that really impacted or influenced the way you practice in international law?
It certainly has an impact because the cases I see impact the teaching.
Right.
And I give you an example from this week. I have a client, and I know that client, and the client is a company, and the guy owning it and running the company, I know him since 20 years. And I said, okay, if you do this great startup company, it's a great company, which does contracts with different nations where they purchase. Some in Mauritius, some in Madagascar. It's textile. And then I told him, let's take the 2 hours and I help you that you get at least the basics of your ordering process right. And he never took the 2 hours. And then they ordered, and things were urgent. Don't ask the lawyers; they just cost money, etc., etc. So he ordered, and now he's in big trouble because something didn't work out. One of the teams couldn't do the trousers as it should have been done, and we have a break. So we have a big chaos because there is no choice of the UNIDROIT principles. And then when you go in the research, you find with one jurisdiction you have the CISG, with others you do not have it. So else, And then I wrote him a WhatsApp and said, and listen, I really got a little bit upset with you. What you did in your company, I taught with my students this week because you did, really big mistakes, which in our teaching are against all classical approach to good lawyering. You totally forgot it. You had the opportunity to get it, just over a cup of coffee, and now you're investing much more money to get sorted out. Basically, we are the lawyers. We very often live, to help people to get rid of the mistakes. But we all know about dental care. 30 years ago or 50 years ago, people just lost their tooth. And when they were old, when they were younger than I'm now 65. So starting age 60, they had no tooth anymore. Today, we have prophylaxis. We go to the dentist and foresee, and we can live longer, and we have nice teeth, and we can speak. And I'm still able to laugh at age 65. Isn't that fantastic?
Yes.
And in law, it's the same. If you invest a little bit in the beginning, especially when it's cross-border, because cross-border is more complicated. It's more challenging. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to trade with people all around. I've traveled a lot, and I remember once I was in a bus in India, and I met a young student from Pakistan, and she did the same stuff which a daughter of a friend in Makati city in Philippines did, and I connected the two, and that's so nice. Around the globe, you can connect people, and then they can start working together.
Yeah, that's amazing. And diving back into some of the cases that you have done before, you have dealt with many cases or contracts involving complex international investments and also transactions. How do you typically approach the legal challenges in this case? And especially when it involves multiple continents, diverse legal systems. One definitely was what you mentioned regarding the UNIDROIT principles. But are there other kind of advice that you would give to people who are looking at similar type cases?
Look at what you are able to master. Which languages do you speak? Are there additional languages which you plan to speak and you will speak soon quite well on a working level?
Yeah.
What is the surrounding? For example, if an American comes to Europe and speaks no foreign language other than English, why not start out in Dublin? Yeah. Dublin is a beautiful city, and people speak English. He will be understood, and that's a good starting point. So I look at the people. I try to listen to the people, to look at the people, and to what they feel good with. I've seen an American investor coming to Europe, and they always have the discussion where to go. And then, of course, you can, in different tax structures, you can earn the last cent. Yeah, I've seen people paying no tax anymore because they travel all the time. But you can do that only for so long. And everybody, at some point, they want to feel happy. Money is not all about happiness. You want to be happy, money helps, but you want to be happy. And so think in that direction. Where is the area? Where will I be happy? What do I need to be happy? And usually people are happy if they have not so much ache of this of the head, of the stomach. Yeah, and you have no aches if you know things are smooth. And this is why let's look at the mandatory law, like anti-corruption, etc., and let's do the rest on a general principles like the UNIDROIT principles. That's perfect. And if there are some local needs, use the local needs. For example, if you're a company based in, I don't know, Nebraska, yeah? Why not offer, if you are also from Nebraska, or if your company has its seat also in North America, we take the law of Nebraska. If you are from somewhere else, we use the UNIDROIT principles. Or if you're from Nebraska law, from outside America, UNIDROIT principles. And if you're from the other states, you choose A or B. I mean, give them freedom and they're happy. And the opposite is, I've seen in one arbitration from one arbitrator who kind of disappeared for a few months from the scene, nearly a year. And he had a very complex case, and the people had agreed on the common principles of German, Austrian, and Swiss law. Details. So he had to go, he had to do the work 3 times. It's too complicated. So let's decide what is really important and really develop something very ingenious, perfect for the really important stuff. And for the rest, we work with the UNIDROIT principles. So I call it simplified global contracting. I combine the UNIDROIT principles. It's one leg on which you're standing in your contract with arbitration. Because the arbitration is so important because it says if there is a dispute, it will be settled. And we have something which we call the New York Convention. You can enforce foreign arbitral awards, recognize and enforce them in other states with the help of that New York Convention, which has over 170 member states. So the other side, even if from another jurisdiction, knows that if she doesn't or he doesn't behave well, it will be enforced. and the mere chance that there would be a dispute resolution mechanism that functions brings people to be good people, to behave nicely. I mean, most contracts work out well because you focus on the things and then you never look at them again. That's the best contract in the end. But they function the best if you know in the worst case they function. And I learned it the hard way. You know, when I was a young lawyer and opened up, I declined partnership at a very well-known big law firm to open my own firm. And then Brödermann Jahn passed away long ago. That was the then senior partner of the other firm, and he came along. And then in one of my first cases, I worked the night through for a Brazilian company. And in the end, they said, no, we don't do it. And I was not paid. And then I looked at my own standard terms as a lawyer and realized I've gone to the court of Hamburg. So, yeah, but what does it help me? A decision of the court of Hamburg to enforce in Brazil? Nothing. If I had an arbitration clause, I would be able to enforce. So I changed it. You know, I learned the hard way as a young, maybe at that time I was 40, and changed that. So I really learned from that experience. Let's think a smart way. And that brings me to the next point. In the next 5 years, we are going to see an incredible change of the world. I heard a professor concentrating on IT and artificial intelligence since the 1980s in Oxford. And he predicts that we're going to witness a change of a factor 200,000, not 5, 10, or 100, 200,000. That's beyond all of us jointly cannot imagine. So things will change hugely. So let's get free brain to concentrate on the new challenges and cover the normal stuff with modern tools like the UNIDROIT Principles of International Commercial Contracts, as developed by the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law.
Very nice, very nice. And interesting that you mentioned about, the laws changing in the next 5 years. What are some areas that you think this would be changing, or what are some of your predictions that this would continue to develop?
Yeah, a slight misunderstanding. I'm not saying that all the laws will change. We will need laws to cope with it, yes, but the normal trade can go on the way we have. But the facts are likely to change. Right. How can I find out that something is not a fake, that something is true?
I see.
And with that, we have new challenges. Or how will arbitration be in the future? Imagine we have a dispute, we want to solve it. Do we just present our facts, or do we sit together and throw it to AI, look at the answer, and then discuss the answer of AI?
Yeah.
How do we evaluate the fact basis of AI? I think that's really dangerous, because if it's open space, we don't know where the sources are coming from.
Yep.
So how do we navigate it? Will there be, like today we have different kinds of, let's say, cars or groups of company with the Microsoft world, the Samsung world, etc. Or will we have protected areas of a group of companies, a group of law firms, or a large law firm? And then say AI looks at all the contracts within that boundaries. Then we know everything AI is taking is coming out of existing contracts. Yeah. That's already a different starting point than AI looking at the internet, where robots could put in fake news, which they would then use.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that everyone's looking out for. And also it'll be interesting to see how different countries will start governing these AI sort of the areas of AI going forward.
Yeah, I mean, if we go one level up, seeking for peace, convincing everybody, including our former friends in Russia, to come back to reason. I mean, it's the 30th war which we're having in that region of the world currently.
Wow.
3-0. And Germany and Austria jointly in the early 1913-14, around that time, already once helped, sending the Russian troops back to their own borders. On the other hand, Germans have not been very good at Nazi times, with 41,000 Jewish Ukrainians killed in the area of Kiev within one weekend. So, life is not black and white. Life has many areas of gray. And I think our challenge is to be optimistic and to see this as challenges and to master this. And to master this both in direction of freedom, democracy, and values, and in the area of trade. We have to combine the two things. And in my teaching, I tell my students, the most important is the values. The second is the self-conscience. I think every student, ladies and men and everybody, everybody is entitled, to speak up and to speak out for herself or for himself. So this self-confidence, and you can train it by speaking with your friends. So train that. And third comes the structure. That's where I see my job as a professor, to help people bring the structure. And only on level number 4 come the norms. So this is why law is so fascinating, because if you do it, you come from value to the norms on the 4th level. And it's a layman perspective to say law is it's just so many rules. But they confuse the details of the rules on the 4th level with the 3 levels before, which are much more important.
Yeah. Which brings me very nicely to our last question. As you reflect back on your career and your journey so far, what advice would you give to younger lawyers who are aspiring to enter the field of international law and consider a career in arbitration?
Don't be shy. You can do it. There's a lot of good reading stuff. Look for people whom you trust as teachers. I took classes of the professors where I like to listen, regardless of what they happen to teach, because in the end, it's values and structure. So do it. You can do it. If you have the chance to participate in the Willem Cevies moot court competition because you're still a student, do it. It's fantastic. 380 universities from around the globe competing with each other and all uniting in Vienna, or there's also Wismut East uniting in Hong Kong. So that's great. And then late in your career, just there are international organizations. There's the Union Internationale des Avocats. There is the International Bar Association. There is AIJA, Association Internationale des Jeunes Avocats, for the young lawyers. And if you're no lawyer, there are other great organizations. Go to these congresses, meet people, and try doing it. If you want to go in arbitration, start writing something. I'm very open. I do a couple of projects. If people approach me, want to do something on the UNIDROIT area, in the UNIDROIT area, it's nice to do something. I'm currently doing a project with a young team in India to write about UNIDROIT principles from the Indian perspective.
Oh, interesting.
And they look from what the Indian courts did with it, and then something will come out of it. Just start it. It's always the first step to do. When I started writing this huge book, in the end, I had a white sheet of page, and I just started. It took me a while. Also me, I had to be pushed. It was a friend of mine who passed away last year who pushed me and said, Eckart, just start. I want you to write this. And then I did.
Very nice. Yeah, I think always, just try it out and see where it takes you. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I think every young person has a right and a chance and to do it and be happy. As long as you're healthy. Yesterday I heard from an Ukrainian person who was born without arms and without legs. He was successful. He is successful in business, rich, with a happy wife and 2 children. And from him comes the sentence, I would give so much of my money away just to be once able to embrace my family with my arms.
Yeah.
And the moment you relate to that kind of fate, we can be so grateful that we are healthy and that we are happy and that we can make us become happy.
Yeah. Yeah. With that, I think thank you so much for making the time today to share with us, Professor Eckart. I think I've been very inspired by, not just your experiences and also how much experience you have across international cases and arbitration to like I attended the IBA conference, and that's how we met in Paris. And then this happened, and love hearing your perspective regarding the UNIDROIT principles, and hope that more people will adopt it so that we can start focusing on what's important in the law. And now that we are going towards the end of the year, then wishing you a very Merry Christmas and also a healthy 2024.
Thank you very much. I return it. Thank you so much. Best regards to Singapore.
Thank you so much, Prof. Eckart. Thank you for listening to Business Beyond Borders. If you have any feedback or thoughts, do write into us at support@bluent.com. Click to follow to tune into the next episode. See you again soon.